Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 6 of the JUSTUS podcast. I'm here joined by the likes of Top 26 and Evie Dog.
Hello, everyone.
We doing today?
Today we'll be talking about the likes of the X-Men franchise's first film, as well as the entirety of Transformers Prime, a revisit of Batman Beyond, and once again another revisit of Toy Story. And by once again, I'm referring to the fact that every single thing we have here is just a revisit. There's nothing really new to talk about since these are franchises that have been in the past, shall we say. It's always good to give them attention because they each have some sort of birthday in the year 2020. It's worth mentioning.
Absolutely. Nothing new, unfortunately.
Maybe we'll see what could be new for the next few episodes, but for now, we're going in, well, not Throwback Thursday or Flashback Friday. Let's call it Send Me Back Saturday.
Oh, yeah. That's a great name.
With all that said, let's delve into the first X-Men movie. Now, a lot of people are spoiled with the likes of the MCU and the DCEU for just how much has been put into those films in terms of Easter eggs, guest appearances, crossovers. But after the first seed of the modern comic book movie formula that is Blade, but before the much more popular Spider-Man film from Sony, there's a lot that we can say about the first X-Men movie that makes it worthwhile. What do you guys think?
After rewatching it, I always thought it was much more campier, like usually those old movies. Like the first Spider-Man movie, like take for example, is definitely has a campy aspect to it, but that's part of the nostalgia of it and why I think I enjoy it so much. Going back with X-Men, that I didn't feel that way until I got more through the movie and realized that I was completely incorrect about my previous regards on the film. The whole dynamic between Charles and Eric is very well done and set up well for the rest of the films as well, I thought.
I agree.
Yeah, it's just, I think the biggest thing that really it's just like Magneto and Charles, they're like great foils to each other, because Eric, he fears the humans, Magneto, but he also is never going to admit it because of what they did to him in the Holocaust. He doesn't want to have to feel that type of fear again. And in his mind, he also doesn't want anyone else to go through that who are mutants. He wants to be their savior.
Yep.
And he thinks he's their savior for his kind, though. But the sad fact is that he's just truly being no better than what the Nazis did to him. This cycle of violence is still going.
Also kind of amusing that they started off the film with his past, where he was a Holocaust victim. Although he's a survivor now, you could probably expect him to move on from it. The fact that he's a mutant gives him a lot more leeway in terms of him having a hatred for the human race. More so for the fact that he is a mutant than the fact that he is a Jew, and especially with how mutants were viewed in the X-Men film universe, then you can definitely see that his hate would be justified, except the fact that he uses brute force compared to the other characters makes you feel that it's a lot more of a conflicting choice. Obviously, you more likely want to stick with the likes of Charles Xavier, but there is a bit of understanding with what Magneto had, if you ask me.
It's interesting because it's like Magneto is a bad guy, but he's also not. Like the whole scene where he had all those cops, like he had all their guns turned on each other and like pointing at the cops, and he was like, "If you don't let go, Charles, I'll kill them." He didn't do that though. He like made it look like he was about to, but he stopped the bullet from actually hitting the man's skull. So to me, that's like Magneto doesn't want to just kill off humans like without a purpose, I guess.
He wants to put them at their knees, especially considering how, in a way, puny they felt when they tried to shoot him. Given the fact that he has metal powers, he was able to stop them by pretty much saying the iconic line of "You Homo sapiens and your guns."
And your guns, yeah.
He puts the guns towards them.
It's part of me is I just think he's such an interesting character because he doesn't just take human life without a purpose. Like, he could have shot all those cops, but he didn't. He waited and he, like, baited out Charles. He knew Charles he would eventually let go. And even with killing with Rogue and her whole role in it, he was like, this one sacrifice is worth it. If you die for our mutant cause to be pushed forward, I can live with that.
Yep.
And then also, again, worth a note is that he's not trying to kill any of the humans, but turn them all into mutants.
Yeah, to put them in his shoes.
He's a different. So the fact, like, his villain status is much different than I would say compared to, like, Green Goblin or any of the other villains, like, you could think of, honestly.
Yeah. He's not like a typical. He's not like a typical "I want to rule the world" sort of guy. He's more so interested in putting things his way, especially considering his past.
He sees himself as a savior of the mutant people, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of think that Charles also sells like that, but under the human is.
Exactly. Charles is the more political, I guess I would say, between the two.
Yeah, he's more reasonable in some ways.
But the only reason Charles isn't like Eric, and this is important, is because of what happened to Eric in the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Eric has that reason to not like the humans, and makes perfect sense.
Although it's a little misguided,
such good characters.
You can definitely see why he would think that way. Plus, Charles had a much better life, which was shown in a past scene from X-Men First Class when he was a younger boy.
Exactly.
Oh, by the way, we'll talk about X-Men First Class next year because it turns 10. So, yeah.
That one was so... I like that one. That one was one of my favorites.
But back to the original movie, it was not only great to see that we had these sorts of discussions that are worth talking about for the X-Men film in terms of how Charles and Eric see each other, but it was also great to see what they did with the X-Men series and put it in a new perspective for audiences who may not be used to the likes of the comics, but do want to see a version of the X-Men characters.
It's worth to note as well, this I feel like was one of the more well-known and first popular like team movies, superhero type team movie. And I think they did it really well. I liked all the characters in this one. I thought each of them had their own type of like personality.
Yep.
And I liked that they left things a little bit in the dark as well. Well, of course, that gets dealt with in the next movies, but I thought it was a good setup for this movie. This overall, the whole entire plot and development of the characters throughout this first film, I thought was done very well, which is kind of hard to do, especially when you're dealing with all those characters for the first time in one movie. Not the easiest thing to do, but I think they pulled it off.
Plus, I much prefer when they bring all these characters together because the X-Men are best together than separate. And we live in a time period where people are pretty much saying stuff like, "Oh, I wish they could have like solo films." I know it makes sense for the likes of Wolverine because he's very popular, especially now with Hugh Jackman's portrayal. But does Cyclops need a solo film? Does Storm? I like Storm and Cyclops. I like Jean Grey. I like all those characters. But I think they're much better off when they're together than when they're separate. The only reason why Wolverine's like that is because he's the most popular of them all.
Yeah. With X-Men, you can't really complain because they are essentially like that in the comics. They are always together. They are a family. And they are all mutants.
I see Wolverine as the Batman of the Justice League. Or, no, Wolverine as the Batman in the X-Men.
Yeah.
Wolverine does his own thing, but he's still a part of the team. Same as like how Batman does his thing.
Right.
But that's how I view it. But also, you need to have a character like that as well, I think, to draw in the audience. And Hugh Jackman, I mean,
Yeah,
the
he's a
man
legend at this
portrayed
point.
the character for so long because of how well he was able to do it.
Yep. And
Like, he takes out the claws in his bestial rage, and you know, oh shit, he's pissed.
yeah, shit's
He's
going
like,
down.
shit's about to go down.
Plus, while people are going to likely praise Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Iron Man because he's played the character for so many appearances, I do find that Wolverine deserves more recognition for the fact that he's played his character longer. Sure, he's had fewer appearances, but I do find his appearances are a bit more meaningful than Iron Man's because Iron Man's there because, well, most of the time Marvel Studios thinks that a movie won't do well without Iron Man. They need Iron Man involved, unless it's like a rare exception. But yeah, Hugh Jackman's appearance may not be as prominent, but at least even when he's not in the film as much, the rest of the film can still stand on its own legs.
Exactly. It gives that setup for the next movie as well. So the film doesn't have to rely on Jackman. I mean, it's an X-Men movie. It's not a Wolverine movie. Yes, Wolverine's a part of it, but in all, it's about X-Men and the mutants together. And I think the plot of this film really highlighted that, and I think that's why the film works.
Yep.
Yeah, they always did that graceful. The X-Men. They didn't concentrate all the attention on one character. They always tried to, make it diverse.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I dug
they
the
also
way,
had a
like,
great cast, too.
I dug
Even
the
the
way,
worst X-Men movies does that well.
yeah.
True.
Well,
That's
aside
very
from
true,
New
'cause
Mutants,
even in X-Men 3, even though it's bad, it's like you can still see the actors are like trying to give it their all. It's just the script was god awful.
well,
And
I wouldn't say
going
that now
back- going
because
back
of the
to-
New Mutants, honestly. Like,
Sorry.
maybe it's the weakest of the three, but I do feel X-Men The Last Stand is still better than what we recently reviewed with X-Men films when it comes to New Mutants.
Oh, well, that's not even a contest.
Yep.
I think we all want to forget about that.
But like,
We all want to
going back
forget
to
that.
like the good X-Men movie, or one of the good X-Men movies, like aside from Wolverine and Charles and Eric, there are other characters I did enjoy. I mean, I enjoyed Cyclops perfectly fine. Sure, people
They all did a great
wished,
job. Yeah.
like, sure, people probably wish he would be a bit tougher, but for what he can do, he did a good job. I do like his visor design. I do like the fact that he's vulnerable without the shades. That's pretty much all I need to know about Cyclops, is that he's got these powers because he's uncontrollable with his eyes.
That's why he's so like tight and strict, because he has to be always on guard. He has to be in control of himself, kind of. Although I still don't know how his whole thing works exactly. Same with Jean.
Yeah, Jean's a little complicated
the whole
too.
Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, but at least Jean was a little more, I suppose, natural, I guess, here than in the other films, especially considering the Dark Phoenix storyline in a later film that related to it entirely on it. But
yeah,
I was fine with her in this film. I also like
I
Storm
was
as
fine
well.
with her too. I just thought they were trying to set her up for the whole Dark Phoenix thing throughout the entire trilogy, I would say. Like, you don't know a lot about her in this first one, but you can see she's powerful. And, like, you like her. And then the second one, they develop that more.
They get
And
rid
then
of
the
her.
third, they just didn't have it.
But I suppose it worked well in hindsight now because of what's been going on with other films, though I guess we'll talk about that later. In terms of the villain mutants, though, aside from Eric, Toad may not have been the most prominent of them all, but I thought Sabretooth and especially Mystique did a great job. Now, I know what you're thinking.
Mystique was great.
We like Mystique just because she's got like a new type of body, but Well, I don't know about you guys, but
She's,
I
I
like her
mean,
character. Like
again,
she's
she's an interesting character too, especially if you watch First Class.
well, I suppose so, but I liked her more mysterious aspect of her in the other films where she felt more like you don't know what she can do next. I mean, for one thing, she could probably like break somebody's neck and then try to take your identity and just run off with it.
I
Yes.
see what you mean. I kind of like how they humanized her a little bit in First Class and Days of Future Past, just because it made her. I thought it enhanced her character. Because I agree with you. I like how she's mysterious and stuff, but I feel like that's all we ever got from her in those movies. We never really learned more. And then First Class and Days of Future Past did that.
Yeah,
But I
they did a
agree
great
with
job
you.
there.
Because the actress too, she does a great job as playing Mystique. I thought she, like, with the whole her and Wolverine fighting each other when
Yeah.
she's disguised as him, that was done great. And then even when she turned back into Mystique form, I would say the campiness definitely came in from the villains. I would say, like Toad and Sabretooth.
Yeah, but it made
It's
sense.
always been.
Like they didn't take away from the tone. I
No,
mean,
exactly.
like it still felt a little more natural. Sort of like it's less like Bulk and Skull humor or less MCU humor, and more
No,
so just
yes.
he's just like
It,
the one that'll get them all in trouble or will get his ass killed if he fucks up. Sort of humor.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they served their purpose.
Yeah. It's a campaign that doesn't ruin experience, and it's also faithful.
Yeah,
They were just there for the X-Men to have each X-Men to have a person to fight against, but
Yeah.
Mystique's
Magneto was the
line.
main bad, and they did good with him. They
Yep.
knew what they were doing. They didn't screw up Magneto,
Yep.
and I really again I really enjoyed rewatching it much more than I thought I would.
I did as well. Although I will say the way the film was set up sort of had this kind of exclusivity to it, and I sort of got that feeling too when Rogue went into the bar, or is it a club where Wolverine was fighting, and
Or whatever.
yeah, it had this sort of exclusivity feel to it. Where almost like you could almost need an ID to enter, given how X Men felt a little more, I guess, exclusive compared to the likes of Spider Man. Especially for its time where I was more used to the likes of Spider Man, Power Rangers, and all that sort of stuff. X Men, despite seeing bits of it, felt more like a premium thing that you would need to watch only if you were, well, older.
It was more complex and more layered than Spider-Man, I would say.
Yeah. That being said, though, like some viewers that are either like new to the film series or probably just saying stupid shit because it's not the MCU or whatever, probably not understand some of the things like how Rogue's character works or how some of the character dynamics work. But if you do pay attention, you get an understanding of how the film overall is. And I do think they did a good job, I'd say.
Definitely nowadays people have no idea who the hell Rogue is. I mean, she's definitely dropped off. But if I was rating this movie, I would say 8 out of 10, I think.
I agree
Or
with that so
7.
much.
Yeah.
That's a good rating.
I think that's fair.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Also, one other thing before we just move on, I wanted to comment on was the special effects. They were really well done, I thought, for 2000.
48.
yeah,
Like with Wolverine cutting through stuff with his claws, like they did a good job, even with some of the CGI. Like,
yeah, like sure,
obviously you can tell it's CGI, but for the time back then, it still looked pretty decent. I again,
especially compared to how stuff like Wolverine Origins had the claws look. Which, if the claws were like that, or if the Wolverine Origin claws were like that in 2000, sure, but that was 2009. The first X movie was 2000. It's like how the Iron Man armors in Infinity War and Endgame look worse visually than the armors from Iron Man 1 and 2.
Yeah,
That's the problem. People think
yeah. I don't want
CGI
to
is.
shit. I don't want to shit on anything else, but for example, let's just decontextualize any movie. And yeah, they won't look great for nowadays. But if you look at them from their age point of view, you even have Avengers that looks very bad for 2012. Let's be honest. It has a lot of visual
What you
effects.
talking about?
Yeah, it was
That's
kind
why
of
movies
grayish.
that have all the CGI do well at the moment they're released, but then when you come back and revisit them, you're like, this really isn't that good. That's the exact experience I had with Avatar.
Yeah.
I thought that movie was like amazing, and then I watched it like 5 years later, and I was like, okay, so this plot is generic, and the CGI is not even good anymore.
Yeah.
We have done better.
Thankfully,
by
some
now.
films
Yeah.
have had good CGI, even by now. Like, the Transformers trilogy has had great CGI overall. Age of Extinction was alright, although some parts feel like the transforming were bad. Last Night was good, although the black bars on the top and bottom were inconsistent, and, well, Bumblebee is Bumblebee. Speaking of Transformers, though, the next subject matter is Transformers Prime. Finally, a good
Yep.
Transformers TV show to talk about in this channel.
Yeah, and I've been waiting for this.
Man, the fact that War for Cybertron was just, well, the Netflix version, not the game. War for Cybertron Netflix was embarrassing in terms of them trying to be all dark and gritty. Sure, it's a bit better than the Prime Wars from Machinima, but it's barely a difference. And Cyberverse was alright, but much like with Beast Morphers, there's some things I feel could be a bit better. Although Beast Morphers had fewer problems than Cyberverse, if I'm being honest. Transformers Prime, on the other hand, I have no major issues to complain about. Is it 100% perfect? No, we'll get to that in a bit. Because I'm going to say this right now, that Transformers Prime is 95% perfect, but that's still a good score nonetheless.
95% is pretty good.
So, where do I begin?
Why not you begin with the actual character representation in this show compared to the others?
Well, Transformers Prime has a bit of a smaller cast than either show we've covered so far, and I think it's pretty good. You know, I do find it kind of unfortunate when some characters do get killed off in Prime, but I guess it makes sense because it's more of a survival thing. War is a pretty dangerous aspect, and while it is kind of lousy how the Viacons can't kill characters like Optimus and Bumblebee, yet some guys like Cliffjumper or Skyquake die, I'm still very happy with how the tone of the war is not compromised in any way, shape, or form with Transformers Prime. But the characters, I feel, are great. I love them all. I enjoyed Optimus Prime, who is pretty much like his movie self, although a bit younger looking when you remove the faceplate. Bumblebee is the same as his
Same voice actor too,
Yeah,
which
Peter
is
Cullen.
I actually remember because I was like 14, I think, when it came out.
Yeah.
During the midday, I would kind of watch it while I was having lunch. And yeah, it was pretty good. Cool.
Like, well,
I
Optimus
always
and
saw
Bumblebee.
commercials for it.
Yeah, well, like Optimus and B were sort of like their movie counterparts, and the same could be said for Megatron, except he has a bit more of the Frank Welker aspect to him. Bulkhead was at least worthwhile because he was a bit more of a mature version of his animated counterpart, with his animated counterpart being more cartoony, a bit more clumsy, and his prime counterpart being a bit more serious, but still having that sort of, well, maybe not clumsy, but more so just big guy feel. RC was great for her sass, and I do appreciate the fact that she has a bit of a tragic backstory with the death of her boyfriends, Tailgate and Cliffjumper, who both share body designs, by the way.
Oh, they do?
Yep. Except Cliffjumper is red and Tailgate's white, but that's because of a budget thing that the show
Yeah,
had. Which
I was
we'll get
thinking
to
about
that.
that. It was probably due to budget.
Ratchet was another great character I loved because he felt, well, less old like the other versions, but he still had his sort of cynicisms, especially when it comes to him wishing for the war to end. Unlike War for Cybertron Netflix Ratchet, who was pretty much all like, I'm not going to support you, Optimus. I only want to do this for the war. Like, Prime Ratchet's at least a bit more willing to help the other guys. Although he does have his disagreements with some of the other characters, he at least sees Optimus as a good friend. Plus, you can't hate on the lines like, Bulkhead, I needed that! Which happens every time Bulkhead crushes something. In terms of the other Autobot characters not from Team Prime, Cliffjumper was cool until he died. He was voiced by The Rock, which was far too expensive, so that was understandable. But the way he was killed in the first episode definitely shows off the tone of the series. It's not fucking around with killing certain characters. Well, for the most part. And the way they killed Cliffjumper was pretty shocking, especially considering the fact that he was hyped up for so long.
So this show definitely sounds like way more well written than the other ones you've reviewed so far.
Yeah. And we haven't even gotten to the story yet, but I'll go through the characters quickly. Smokescreen was another Autobot that we got later on in the series. He's less like the Gambler from G1 or the Crane guy from Armada. He's more of a rookie, a bit younger than Bumblebee even, but he has his own potentials to help the other characters. Plus, I also do appreciate the fact that he was willing to stick with Optimus Prime when Optimus was brutally injured at Season 3's beginning. As for another character that showed up before Smokescreen, there was Wheeljack, who, unlike in G1, was a repairman, and Armada, who was a bit of a traitor and had a beef with Hotshot, or even Dark of the Moon, where he was pretty much Albert Einstein. Wheeljack in Transformers Prime was a wrecker. He's kind of a bad boy, and he doesn't quite agree with Optimus Prime's form of leadership, with Optimus Prime, well, not being a goody two-shoe, but more so having a focus on regulations in some ways, but not as much as Ultra Magnus does. Now, you guys know Ultra Magnus, right?
Yes. Definitely heard of Ultra Magnus.
Now, people say that he's the coolest Transformer ever because he's like Optimus Prime, except he has his own weapons. But there's one problem I do have with him. While he's tough, he's not as tough as Optimus. Ultra Magnus gets his ass beaten by most of the characters, including Predaking, including Megatron, and honestly, I can make a joke about him tripping over a tiny ladybug, and yeah, it's kind of sucky that he didn't get as cool as the other guys, but still nice to have him in the cast, I suppose.
Wait, hold on. You're saying people think Ultra Magnus is better than Optimus Prime?
In some ways, but the thing is, Ultra Magnus...
What?
I've never heard of, but he's pretty cool. Yeah.
I think it's because they try to hype up his toys, because Ultra Magnus does look cooler than Optimus, but in terms of competence, Optimus is much more capable than Ultra Magnus.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe look-wise, that's it. But character-wise, Optimus is clearly the better one.
Yeah. Plus, this isn't even exclusive to Prime. I mean, in G1, the first movie alone had Ultra Magnus get shot down repeatedly when he failed to open the Matrix. And in animated, he was like refusing to give Optimus any credit or like not wanting him to do anything dangerous. Sentinel was worse. And one blast from Shockwave killed animated Magnus. Robots in Disguise for Ultra Magnus from the 2001 anime was at least competent, but he was kind of a dick. We'll talk about those next year, I suppose. But that's the Autobots. The Decepticons have Megatron, who you'd pretty much expect. Starscream, who is a bit different this time. He's sort of like a coward. People love him for his expressions whenever he starts freaking out over being yelled at by Megatron or facing Predaking, especially his wings, which droop when he gets concerned or worried or threatened.
Isn't that... I thought that was normally how Starscream was portrayed, though, because that's how he was portrayed in the live-action movies.
Well, in the live-action movies, he wasn't that treacherous. He was mostly just sticking around with Megatron, trying to do what he can and potentially wanting to overthrow him, but not really wanting to because, well, he didn't really do much of a good job of leading the Decepticons while Megatron was gone in Revenge.
So So then, how would you say Starscream is usually portrayed then? Because I thought that was how
Well,
it
in
was in the
G1,
live action
in G1,
movies.
Starscream was pretty much, I want to take over the Decepticon leadership. In Armada, Energon, and Cybertron, he's a bit more complicated because he wants to basically take over Megatron because he has different points of views, or rather, he wants to not agree with Megatron's ways of leading the Decepticons. And Energon that was kind of thrown away because he has no memory of his past, and Cybertron, he's back to being treacherous. Of course, the movies depict Starscream in a more traditional manner, but nowhere near as treacherous and traitor-worthy as the other guys. And animated, well, he gets shot down a couple of times. Megatron comes back as a ghost, has clones, and can easily make his own army. But why he doesn't take it to his full advantage to overthrow Megatron is beyond me, aside from him wanting to get the Allspark key. Prime Starscream is different because he's got these ambitions, although what gets him from getting to those ambitions is the fact that he gets his ass beaten. And although he sometimes attempts to win, for example, when he tries to go up against RC gets pissed off when he mentions Cliffjumper, and he gets to his knees when RC beats the crap out of him.
So, one of the main differences from the others mentioned before from Formers is that it actually has stakes, because you said characters die, or they're eliminated now.
Yeah, Starscream is making sure he doesn't get eliminated from this supposed game.
So, how does this story compare then to the others, if it's so much better?
We'll get to that in a bit because we're almost done with the Decepticons.
Okay.
Soundwave, well, doesn't do much. He's a bit creepier than the other Soundwaves because he barely talks. The only time he ever talked was to mock the Autobots when the data was erased in Season 3. Then we got to the likes of more infrequent characters like Knockout, who survived. He's kind of a flamboyant Decepticon. Is voiced by Darren Norris and turns into the red car that Timmy's dad drove, kind of, sort of, maybe. There's also Bulkhead's enemy Breakdown, who, unlike in G1, was a paranoid bitch. Breakdown in Prime was a big brute. He had beef with Bulkhead and wants him to die. Although Breakdown dies and loses his eye and gets even used for a corpse, one of the human characters, which we'll get to later. There's also Arachnid, who was kind of like Mystique, except she turns into a helicopter and she has spider powers, so she's sort of like an evil Spider Girl or Spider Woman.
Okay, interesting.
We've had
Never heard of one.
We had Skyquake and Dreadwing, who are pretty much brothers. They're repeats of each other. They're seekers. And whereas Skyquake dies in one episode and comes back as a zombie, Dreadwing sticks around a bit longer but dies in Season 2 upon learning that Starscream used his brother as an experiment with Dark Energon. As we finish up with the Decepticons, we have Shockwave, who is a villain that appeared in Season 2, returned in Season 3 with his new baby, Predaking, who is a giant dragon transformer that was the king of the Predacons. While the other Predacons don't show up in Season 3, aka Beast Hunters, so there's no point in that sort of subline, it at least made sense in the context that Predaking is the threat, the Autobots need to stop him, especially now that they've just gone together. And, of course, there's also other characters like Darksteel, Skylynx, the Viacons, the Insecticons. But there's so many characters to talk about. Not as much as the other series, mind you, but a handful that need descriptions because they've done more than any of the other characters in their shows because of the story.
They're the most fleshed out.
Yeah.
Compared to the other ones you've reviewed. Okay.
Yeah. In a way similar to how Animated and Beast Wars fleshed out their characters in terms of TV show context, because I do find TV show context to be different from comic and movie context, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, yeah.
So why don't we go to the story?
Yes, please do. I'm dying to know what happened that made it so good.
All right. So, this story supposedly takes place after the events of the Cybertron games because this is all part of the aligned continuity, everything's supposed to be in the same universe. And while it
Sure.
seems a bit weird to imagine that a G1 style Optimus Prime and Bumblebee would turn into versions of them that look like the movies, the context of the stories are believable because, much like in the game, Dark Energon is a part of the first season. The Decepticons want Dark Energon. They want to use it to power up the Terracons, which are dead Transformers that Megatron wants to resurrect as an army. And Megatron, upon returning from his 3-year absence, makes the stakes even higher for the Autobots because they've been on Earth for a while. They need to not only stop the Decepticons, but they also need to take care of these kids that stumbled upon them because these kids are involved. They need to make sure that they're fine. Season 1 definitely gave us an introduction to how these Autobots and Decepticons are, but thankfully it's nowhere near as fillery as you would think. There's episodes devoted to the likes of Jack trying to street race against some other guys, and of course, people might find characters like Raph and Miko kind of annoying, but at least the human characters here. The first time we ever mentioned human characters in terms of a Transformer show we've reviewed, by the way.
Okay, that's
Yeah, like, despite how episodic some stuff of it is, Prime's at least fairly serialized. We've gotten characters fighting over not just Dark Energon, with the Autobots trying to keep it away from the Decepticons or them trying to infiltrate any mining bases. We've also gotten stuff like battles for artifacts. I remember there being a device that would extract the life out of a Transformer, and that was something that Starscream had, which pretty much made both races go after it, or both factions go after it. We also had stuff like Dangerous Adventures, where Bumblebee went into the mind of Megatron when Megatron was in a coma of sorts. After Optimus was infected, Bumblebee needed to find a way to get a cure from Megatron, who knew of it. And it was kind of risky too because the Autobots that were going to the base were just 2 of them. They needed to make sure nobody else saw what was going on. And of course, no one had any idea that Megatron would somehow possess Bumblebee's mind after they escape. And of course, it leads to the resurrection of Megatron. And I like how some episodes tie into stuff like continuous storylines. Not everything is resolved in one episode. It takes a few more episodes to get to it. A conclusion of sorts for certain story arcs. For example,
So they start things and then
they
like,
keep going.
we'll finish them off later.
Yeah.
Like teasing you what's to come.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Megatron wasn't just revived in one episode. It took them a while for him to return, and when they returned, like the way they done it was pretty mind blowing because I don't think we've ever seen Megatron possess another Autobot to get him to revive him. I know he's like manipulated Professor Sumdac from Animated and thinking that he can easily rebuild him a new body because he tricked him into thinking he was an Autobot. But the fact that Megatron took over Bumblebee's mind was shocking.
Yeah.
Megatron took over Bumblebee's mind. That's ridiculous.
But it works.
Wow.
It does work. I remember it. I get tiny flashbacks because, again, I probably watched just some episodes. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
I agree. And we've also got other story arcs that don't conclude themselves immediately. Like when Starscream wanted to join the Autobots after he escaped from the Decepticons, he didn't just go back to the cons, he stayed away from both factions for a while. It wasn't until near the end of Season 2 where he decided, you know what, I'm going to be with Megatron once again. Sure, we might not see each other in the same eye, but at least he can help me. That was pretty much the mindset Starscream had.
I get that. Makes sense.
We've also gotten stuff like the way the rivalry between Bulkhead and Breakdown works. Usually it's different circumstances. Either Breakdown usually tries to get the edge, whereas Bulkhead needs the help of somebody else to win. But then sometimes, like there's certain moments where it's changed up a bit. For example, when Breakdown was at one point captured by Mech, a terrorist group that would later on create their own transformer, which we'll get to in a moment. Bulkhead didn't just like Bulkhead at first wanted to leave him there because he didn't like Breakdown, but the Autobots convinced him that it's best that they help him out because even though he's a Decepticon, they still want to make sure that he doesn't become a victim of a terrorist group like Mech. On top of that, it definitely taught Bulkhead that even though he's not from the same faction as they are, there's at least some sort of way that they can see eye to eye in some capacity. Although Breakdown does get killed around season 2.
Just be killing off characters left and right sometimes.
Yeah. And you want to know who killed him?
Oh no, who?
Arachnid.
Really?
Yeah. Arachnid is pretty much the mystique of the franchise in some ways, like I mentioned. And it makes sense because she's sneaky, she's uncomfortable, and get this, Arachnid, she has a ship that crash landed in the forest around season 1, and it has the heads of extinct species.
Ooh.
Fancy.
Yeah, she's a cold-blooded murderer in contrast to most of the Decepticons. Like, even Megatron wouldn't probably think like that. All he just wants to do is have everything in his hand. Maybe he'd have the head of Optimus Prime, but he wouldn't go that far.
I know you low-key wanted to say a cold-blooded bitch, but okay.
Yeah. If I doesn't stop there, speaking of cold-blooded, Dark Energon being a resource of power is almost like a kind of a drug in some ways, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But when it comes to the way the stories work with the finales, I love how they handle the finales. For example, season 1's finale, we get a multi-part story of Unicron rising up. We get stuff like the backstory of Optimus and Megatron's past, how they were once friends, how the war turned out to be. Then we get stuff like Optimus and Megatron decided to work together for a bit and stop Unicron.
Isn't he like the most powerful Decepticon?
He's not even a Decepticon, bro.
Just out of everything?
Yeah. He is the opposite of Primus.
He's a planet, right?
Not this time.
Okay.
In the Prime universe, as well as in the Last Night, this Unicron is the core of the Earth.
He's in the core of the Earth?
Yeah. He is pretty much the center of the Earth. Like, it's crazy to think about it. Like, it's scary. Like, sure, a Death Star bootleg is scary, but it's even scary to imagine that if Unicron were to cause problems, then he's pretty much a natural disaster. Plus, as far as I can remember, they established that if Unicron were to die, then the Earth would collapse in and of itself. So the best way to stop Unicron would be to purify basically the center by using the Matrix, which weakens Unicron's dark influence and keeps the Earth safe from all these natural disasters.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, so it's less planet stuff or less bootleg Death Star, less 80s cliche rock punk song crap with a Luke Skywalker wannabe, and more so a guy who is going to kill the planet if he is not attended by the combined forces of Optimus Prime's Autobot team and Megatron. But
I mean that it,
like aside from aside from the fact that it doesn't just end with Unicron's core basically being taken down or taken care of, season 1 just doesn't end with everybody going home. Oh no. At the end, Optimus Prime asks Megatron, "Where are we, Megatronus?" revealing that he lost his memory. And the Autobots didn't take him home to try and help him out. Megatron basically tricked Optimus into thinking that they're still friends. He took him to the Nemesis, while the Autobots are left wondering what are they going to do with Optimus now living with Megatron. And that's pretty much crazy to think about because most of the time they try to wrap up a season with a neat bow and tie. But I like the fact that they left it with this cliffhanger.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way they can go. It's either bow and tie or like, oh, this is what's coming next.
Yeah. Season 2 starts off with the same storyline where Optimus Prime still thinks he's Orion Pax. The Decepticons pretty much treat him like their own. They even make a Decepticon insignia on his shoulder. Of course, Orion Pax, being a data clerk, wants to know about who he is. The Decepticons try to make him think that he's part of their team the whole time, and that the Autobots are oppressors, but Orion Pax still wants to learn. And when he knows too much, they pretty much do that one meme where they think he's learned enough. We gotta stop him. Yeah. And it's well done because, it's not just resolved immediately after, but it's also showing off the fact that the Decepticons are trying their best to make sure he doesn't know who he is. It's almost like almost like a non-disclosure agreement of sorts, where if he were to find out about who he was, and they would pretty much murder him. And over time, Optimus starts realizing that he's not Orion Pax, but Optimus Prime. Like, he gets surprised that he has weapons built into him, for crying out loud.
Oh.
Thankfully, the Autobots are able to find a way to get him back to normal, mainly going to Vector Sigma and using that to restore Optimus's memories, which ends the Orion Pax story arc of the opening of Season 2.
Yeah.
After that, we get stuff like the Autobots trying to help Bumblebee when he loses his T-Cog from Mech, who are trying to make their own Transformer. We also get stuff like the fact that the Autobot team is splitting up for a bit in hopes of looking for the artifacts. For example, Optimus encounters Dreadwing and Starscream in the Arctic. Bumblebee and RC are going to New York subway stations or the train tunnels. Bulkhead is going in a more toxic area to look for toxic energon. Well, he encounters one of the Insecticons known as Heartshell. And Ratchet decides to meet up with Wheeljack, who has been around on Earth. And by the way, I like how Season 1 gave us an episode where Wheeljack makes his debut, and of course he comes back. Like, he leaves, but he has a doppelganger named Makeshift who is transformed into Wheeljack to try and manipulate the Autobots in getting what they need and potentially killing them off from the inside of the base. These are still story arcs or episodes that, despite being fairly separated, are still part of the same ongoing plot of the Autobots looking for these new artifacts.
So it is all connected.
Yeah.
Okay.
We also
So
get stuff we get usual stuff of Bumblebee and RC being themselves, Optimus thinking about how the moralities of Dreadwing are compared to most cons, along with Starscream just hanging around because there's nothing else for him to do, aside from just think of a way to try and survive with no way to transform after his T-Cog was removed from Mech. We even get stuff like Ratchet having a better appreciation for Wheeljack after they were facing off against Soundwave and Laserbeak. But aside from the season conclusions, I did like the fact that the cliffhanger also occurred before the hiatus, where before he found out that Bulkhead was, or after the episode where Bulkhead was looking for toxic energon, he comes back after being shot from a heavy fight against Hardshell. He's burnt out. Raph and Ratchet go to him and start realizing what happened, and when we come back, it isn't immediately resolved. Bulkhead has been injured badly, so Miko and Wheeljack decide to have revenge.
Okay.
We continue forward with the story as usual, with a new introduction of a character, that being Smokescreen. We get a backstory of how RC and Cliffjumper encountered Shockwave. We also get preparations for stuff like Starscream's return to the Decepticons. Although beforehand, we got stuff like Nemesis Prime, a mech-created transformer that was pretty much a not just referencing the fact that Orion Pack's story arc occurred, but also the fact that it was Mech trying to make the Transformers look bad, specifically Team Prime. Plus, there's also the fact that the government is likely going to be split on how they're going to do any sort of handling with the Autobots if they kept on thinking that Nemesis Prime was a rogue Optimus instead of a clone.
So, what about the series finale? Like, I heard it's like 3 to 4.
Yeah, we'll
I
get to
don't
that in a
know.
bit. But after all the crazy stuff that happened in season 2, the next finale for season 2 is just as crazy as the first. The
Oh,
Decepticons make their
yeah.
doomsday device. They prepare to cyberform the Earth, and the kids are held hostage. The military can't do anything. The Autobots need to either surrender the artifacts, or the kids will die, and so will the rest of the planet. And of course, thankfully, Optimus Prime has a powerful weapon, that being the Star Saber, which in a previous episode was shown off to be an ancient artifact of the Primes. Of course, season 2 is all about the Autobots looking for ancient artifacts. We got stuff like the Star Saber, the Forge of Solus Prime, which is a hammer. Megatron finds a Dark Star Saber, but he needed the arm of a Prime to wield it, so he got a brand new arm from one of the dead Primes to wield the Dark Star Saber to go up against Optimus. And although the although the fights between the two with the swords was great, it was kind of funny how season two's finale has Megatron lose the Prime arm when Optimus cut it off with the regular Star Saber.
Wait, can you repeat that one more time? Megatron did what?
Megatron got his arm cut off in the finale fight after Optimus cut it off because Megatron, despite having all this strength and having a Dark Star Saber, wasn't a true Prime.
So he couldn't wield it.
Well, he did wield it, but Optimus pretty much prevented him from wielding it ever again by cutting his arm off.
Damn. And that was the series finale, season finale
Yes,
for 2? Damn.
but it doesn't end there. Oh no. The Doomsday
season.
device may have been
No.
destroyed, but the Nemesis still has power. So now we get Starscream's new Seeker army trying to hunt down the Autobots. The Autobots return to their base and try to find a way to survive. They all split up, and Optimus is left in the base, trying to make sure that everyone else is away from the attack. Unfortunately, the Nemesis destroys the base after they locate it. The artifacts from the base that the Autobots found were taken away, and Optimus is left in the rubble, buried there, barely clinging on his life, with Smokescreen returning at the beginning of season 3, trying to find a way to keep him alive. And much like with the beginning of season 2, season 3 gives us a big way to return to the show. As mentioned, Shockwave returns and brings in a Predacon known as Predaking, which the introduction to it alone was just kind of surprising because we've had stuff like Unicron, we've had stuff like Insecticons, we've had a lot of crazy designs, but a dragon transformer, one that towers over everybody else. Like, I know Predaking's bigger, but that dragon was like insane to think about when it comes to its introduction in the show.
I'm looking up a picture right now of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we'll talk about this in a bit, but unfortunately, Predaking shrinks in his robot mode, but his dragon mode is ginormous. The Autobots. Yeah.
How big?
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's ginormous. Dude. Oh, that must be sick.
Yeah. I hope the audience knows who Predaking is, especially if they're big Transformers Prime fans. But yeah.
Yeah.
Predaking was big. And with a new threat like that, the Autobots really needed to make sure that they come back together. With Jack split up from the other guys along with RC, with Bumblebee hanging out with Raph on his own, Nico with Bulkhead and Wheeljack, Smokescreen staying behind in base after surviving the blast because of his powers. We get the introduction of Ultra Magnus. And as mentioned, he looks a bit cooler than Optimus, but unfortunately, Ultra Magnus is a lot more strict than Optimus is. Thankfully, they're able to get the other Autobots together. They're about to infiltrate the Dark Mount base, which is a giant tower that the Decepticons now have, and things are about to go down at first. However, the Autobots are taken down by the Decepticons, although thankfully they took care of Predaking beforehand, leaving him in a frozen Arctic area, but he escapes later on. Don't worry. Smokescreen, having looked for the Forge of Solus Prime, was able to bring it to Optimus, and at first, Optimus wants Smokescreen to use it and take the Matrix, but Smokescreen finds it's much better for Optimus to come back with an upgraded body. Now, the body design that Optimus has in Season 1 and 2 is sort of like a mix between the movies and animated, but the body in Season 3 is a beefy design, which I'm sure some are going to think it's like G1, but honestly, I don't see it as much of G1. It's more like just a beefy Optimus Prime, because if you see the show, like he towers over his original form, towering over Magnus and almost at the same height of Megatron. He even gets a jetpack, which surprised Megatron and Starscream when he shows up and punches Megatron and kicks him in slow motion. The Decepticons lose. Dark Mount gets taken down, and the Autobots are finally glad to be home. They have a new base in the form of a military base that, while not as cool looking as the command post from seasons 1 and 2, is still better than nothing. And now we have the main 5 members of Team Prime, along with newcomers Wheeljack, Smokescreen, and Ultra Magnus. They're all glad to be together once again. They follow their routines of pretty much going up against the Decepticons when it comes to stopping other Predacons from being made. Hell, even one episode has not just a reveal of Predaking's robot mode, who as mentioned is much smaller than his dragon mode, but we also get stuff like Ultra Magnus, Wheeljack, pretty much destroying the other Predacons from being made. We get stuff like Ratchet doing a dark deed for the Decepticons with possibly Synth Energon. We even get stuff like Knockout holding the mother of Jack, that being June Darby, as well as Agent Fowler, who, should I mention, is not just a human ally of the Autobots. Like, he's obviously a grown man, but Agent Fowler is a guy that's involved with the military. He's a former either Marines pilot or Air Force pilot, but he's been there for a good while, and he's pretty much been sort of like a spokesperson for the Autobots in terms of being a human that can reason out with the other guys.
We were still in 3, right?
Yeah. We get to the end of season 3, and this time, instead of there being like some sort of big cliffhanger, we actually get surprises already in terms of, for example, we think that Bumblebee was going to die because Megatron shot him down before he can like get the Star Saber to Optimus. However, little did Megatron know that Bumblebee's wounds were healed in the pool of, I believe, Energon that was used for the Doomsday device within the ship. And get this, we get to hear someone yell out Megatron's name with an unfamiliar voice, and as it turns out, it's Bumblebee, who not only got his voice back, but is also back alive from the fatal shots that he got from Megatron.
Oh, shit.
It's been very nice.
Yeah. And I'll never forget the lines he said to him. "You took my voice. You will never take anything from anyone ever again," after he stabbed the Decepticon.
Ooh. Oh.
The Decepticons
Bumblebee's a
retreated.
badass!
Yeah.
Actual badass.
Yeah, he's always a badass in general. Well, aside from G1 and I guess animated, because he was kind of goofy and animated, but I love that scene of Bumblebee from that episode because it was great to hear him talk in a cartoon, especially considering the fact that what he said just gave me chills in some ways, because never did I expect him to actually say something like that to Megatron. the fact that it was at the end of the season feels like the perfect way to end off the show. After the Decepticons retreat, of course, we get to see the goodbyes between the humans and the Autobots, especially
Yeah.
a touching moment between Bumblebee and Raph, with Raph saying you didn't have to say anything before he left, and Bumblebee said, I didn't. And that's the end of the show, which was already grand in its own, but they wanted to give us an even bigger conclusion with Predacons Rising. Now, the movie itself was not a theatrical film, it was only made for TV, but it's a good animated TV film. Unfortunately, season 3 of Prime was much shorter than seasons 1 and 2, so to make up for the lack of episodes in Beast Hunters, which is 13 compared to 26 that we got from seasons 1 and 2, which in a total will make around 52 episodes combined, Beast Hunters at least had the movie to make up for the cut down amount of episodes. And I liked Predacons Rising. At first, I thought it was kind of annoying because they didn't show off too many Predacons, or they took this long to introduce us to other Predacons like Darksteel and Skylynx.
Yeah.
But I liked it. It was great to see the Autobots return to Cybertron. It was great to see Megatron come back, albeit possessed by Unicron. Full on redesign. People are going to be like, well, he should have been Galvatron, but I'm fine with him being possessed by Unicron. I much prefer for him to have like a Unicron look to him because Unicron was a bronzish, rusty looking guy in Prime. I much prefer for him to look like that than to be a purple Megatron, if you ask me.
That's his look in Prime. I did say I thought it was cool. That was another thing I wanted to ask you. What did the animation? Is this the best one?
We'll get to that in a bit.
Animation wise?
We'll get to that in a bit, but spoiler alert, it's great. But yeah, Predacons Rising ends off with the Autobots looking for the Allspark, as well as them trying to avoid the Predacons, and even Megatron, or rather Unicron, taking over Megatron's body and causing chaos on Cybertron. It was emotional. It was great to see not just the Autobots work together, but also the few Decepticons that stuck around, like Knockout, and even the Predacons willing to help because Predaking, Darksteel, and Skylynx didn't like the fact that Unicron was pretty much taking over their species. It was a great Ragnarok-esque sort of battle, and when I say Ragnarok, I don't mean that comic book film that was released 3 years ago. I mean an actual Ragnarok of sorts. The battle was massive, and sure, the Star Saber would have been great to use against Unicron, but I'm not complaining because the battle we got was pretty sweet. Admittedly, it was kind of shocking to see Megatron actually disband the Decepticons, but unlike in, say, the IDW comics, which honestly I was alright with until we got to this part where Megatron says, I'm going to be an Autobot after Bumblebee died. At least the reason for Megatron to like separate himself from the war was because he experienced pain from Unicron. He looked up to Unicron and he saw just how abusive Unicron was, and he thought, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to be an Autobot. The Decepticons are no more. That's final. And he just ran off.
I think I would have expected that.
Sure, a villain becoming good is a bit weird, but at least he didn't like join the Autobots. He just ran off.
That's true. I guess so wasn't so
Yeah,
fair.
much more preferable than IDW's method of turning Megatron into an Autobot. And of course, we get to see the proper goodbyes for the characters. Optimus Prime reveals that the Matrix of Leadership is now bonded to the Allspark, which means that he is one with the artifact. And for him to bring back life across Cybertron, he needs to sacrifice himself. And when he says goodbye to the other members, it was great to see him throw himself into the pit of Cybertron, to the core of the planet, and revive every dead Transformer on the planet. And it was a beautiful scene. It even got to see a bit of what looked like Optimus' spark flying towards the camera. The other guys that were involved with stopping the Unicron's battle each had worthiness of being a leader like him. Whether it's Bumblebee, whether it's Ultra Magnus, even though he got his ass beaten by the two Predacons introduced in the film, whether it's RC, or Bulkhead, or Ratchet, or Smokescreen, or Wheeljack, or even Knockout. They've all done what they could to help stop the battle against Unicron, and they've done a tremendous job. And that concludes the story of Transformers Prime, which ends there in a great level until you see Robots in Disguise, the 2015 show, which is a sequel to Prime. Do I really need to talk about that one? Nah, some other time. So, yeah, the story, it's big. And there's a lot that was great to talk about, but it's so good. I like when they go on these big adventures. I like when they continue off of certain story arcs that don't end off immediately. I mean, sure, the Nemesis Prime story arc ended off a bit too soon in one episode, but at least it was part of a bigger story arc that involved Mech trying to be superior to the Transformers race.
I mean, when a show starts off as something and then you're slowly realizing that, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't what I thought it was, it's becoming something else. That's the best thing it can do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what what Prime did.
Yeah. War for Cybertron obviously had like 6 episodes, so the best they can do is make a story that would be good for a movie. But the problem was that what they did just felt pretty slow. Characters talked too much. When they went into action, the action itself felt pretty weak. Transformers Prime, sure, it was a different sort of show. It had more episodes, it had fewer characters, but they made the most out of it. They made the story as great as they can. They made the characters as worthwhile as they could, although some of them did die, and it was just the perfect harmony, if you ask me.
I mean, that does sound like quite the story, I will say. I might have to check it out, honestly, because it does sound pretty epic.
Yeah, you definitely should. I mean, you have no idea on how excited I get every time a new episode pops up. Like, I'm always thinking to myself, oh my god, new Transformers episode, I can't wait. Like, when I had DirecTV, we didn't have the hub, so I tried to take advantage of watching the hub when it was free, and they thankfully did have reruns of the show, and I was very happy to catch up on it, especially when it came to Beast Hunters Predacons Rising, although that was actually uploaded on YouTube weeks before the movie was officially aired on the hub. And I enjoyed every last bit of the show and the film because I loved what they did. The characters, the story were just so good, and like the fact that they just don't conclude too soon, that they keep on building up on it, or even if they did, it was just part of a big arc. It was tremendous.
Yeah.
That's, in my opinion, how a show can be so good. If they just keep building and building and are setting something up, and then boom, they combine it all together into one like smashing huge climax.
Exactly.
And then can sell it off with the ending as well. Perfect.
And I think that's what a lot of shows try to do afterwards with Prime. But with Robots in Disguise, the problem with that show is that it felt pretty episodic, and of course there were things that we need to talk about with Robots in Disguise to understand it. Cyberverse did similar things to Prime, where it had story arcs that were easy to build off of, but unless you were binge watching the entire series, because the episodes were 11 minutes instead of 22 minutes, you felt like you were just watching one episode and didn't get the most out of it, whereas with Prime, the 22-minute episode length worked well.
I think the 22-minute episode length is the way to go. We've talked about this before. I think that is the perfect amount of time for a show that's animated or like this style.
Yeah.
And story, how they tell the story episodically, kind of, and improving it more as it goes on. That's the best way they can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
11 minutes is
11
too
minutes.
short to do enough.
I think 11 minutes works well for something like SpongeBob or
Exactly.
Ed, Edd and Eddy, where you can make a good story out of 11 minutes because your audience might want to see something new immediately, whereas with a TV show like Prime or Power Rangers, 22 minutes works well because you're doing an ongoing story.
Yeah, and usually those animations aren't captivating for a long time. They just need to concentrate a few minutes. just like what happened with the new Adventure Time. They are like 40 minutes long, and I mean they are cool, but I still feel it's not that charming as the
Yeah.
original show.
40-minute episodes for Adventure Time, really?
There's a reason why
Yeah,
you should do
they
11 minutes for a
probably
show
way
like that,
better.
whereas a show like Prime should have 22 minutes per episode because of how they handle the stories.
Yeah, I think it's perfect.
But now let's talk about the animation. Hot
Yeah,
Mama, is the animation in
animation was
Prime
great.
so good? It's
Yeah.
smooth, the frame rate is great, the way they fight is tremendous, the facial expressions are outstanding. On top of that, the voice work that they have is impeccable. Whether it's the robots or the humans or the more uncommon characters, everyone does their best to make a great voice for the characters who are already well animated. The transformations
Yeah,
are especially nice to see.
I remember making a comparison back then. I would put Clone Wars and Green Lantern, Beware the Batman, all those 3D shows, and
Oh my
I
god.
can agree that this Transformers show had one of the best animations for that
Yeah.
time. Really
We
good.
gotta talk about those shows too, because there's a lot to talk about with Clone Wars, which we might do for a certain episode. But I would like to cover Beware the Batman and Green Lantern at some point, because I feel that those shows are just as good as Prime.
Yeah, they're actually very story centric. They were very good. Mm.
And on top of that, the
Beware the
CGI is
Man had
just
started something.
tremendous. But like, whether it's transformation or combat or just standing there looking natural when they're not doing much, the CGI for Transformers Prime is perfect. And it's very
Yeah.
unfortunate how Robots in Disguise, the 2015 sequel, well, I get they wanted to make it look refreshing, but it's just a bit of a shame that the frame rate had issues, and we get stuff like War for Cybertron, Netflix, and Power of the Primes or the Prime Wars trilogies, which their CGI was garbage.
Yeah, they changed
Especially
it from each
embarrassing
new
when
thing.
Yeah, it's especially embarrassing when the same studio that made War for Cybertron Netflix's animation did Prime 10 years ago. And, like, how did we go from unique character models with well made animation and well thought out movement for them, go from that to this with War for Cybertron Netflix, where the character models are just the CAD files of the toys, and the facial expressions are dull surprise, and the fight sequences look lousy.
Quality's not always the best. It can drop.
Yeah, and I thought the transition from the CGI of Beast Wars and Beast Machines to the CGI of Energon and Cybertron was bad, and I liked Cybertron,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I feel the same way with Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah.
I thought the
That's-
Rebels animation
that's
was.
something we gotta talk about for another day.
Yeah,
We're dropping way
exactly.
too many hints, but hey, we're getting close to that day. But yeah,
But
Transformers Prime
okay,
CGI.
I have one more question for you before you continue. So, with this animation, is it like more cartoonish or more like computer generated?
Well, I say
Like,
it's
I'm
more
trying to
computer
think.
generated. Like,
Like,
how do I put it this way? The CGI is not cartoony. It's got a grounded approach to it, where it feels like a cartoon, yes, but it's not a stereotypical cartoon. You know, the character models look professional. The atmosphere works well, and they make the most out of it, even with the budget issues that they had. But nothing, and I mean nothing, tops off Prime best than the music that they have, because I already love the music that the Transformers movies have from Steve Jablonsky, but the music done
Yeah.
for Transformers Prime is just as good. It feels like an extension, if you ask me.
So cool.
I always love listening to the
Remember-
intro alone every time we get to hear the Autobots like driving in the highway and transforming in front of the moon. The music is just atmospheric, like the CGI's tone looks, and it makes me miss when the fiction was just as good as the toys, which I wish I could say the same about the fiction we get now for Transformers, because while the toys are great, the fiction isn't as good as what we used to get with the fiction, like with Prime.
We just need good
On
storytellers.
top of that,
But
like even outside of the intro, I do like some of the more like the music that he chose, whether it's in the fight or in a more uh, isolated area where the music feels a lot more calm. It's
music's
well
an
put
important
together.
part.
Yep, and it
It
gives the show an
can
identity.
totally enhance a moment in a scene, can make it more dramatic, can make you more suspenseful. And then if the music's, like you said, the intro to the show is
Yeah.
really good. The opening, yeah, okay. So, I mean, that just already makes the show so much better.
Yeah, it gives it its own identity. Like, for example, how the G1 cartoon has an identity with its music, where it's got that sort of well, how do I put it? It's not exactly 80s ish, but it has that sort of like get into action sort of feel to it compared to say Transformers Prime, which is more cinematic in terms of its music, or Beast Wars, which is more rock heavy.
Hmm.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So, overall,
Well,
out of 10.
before we do, there are some things that are worth talking about with Prime in terms of its flaws. For
Oh,
one
okay,
thing,
sure.
some of the characters do get killed off a bit too soon. Sure, not a bad thing because it happens from time to time, but I can definitely see why some fans would be upset with Cliffjumper getting killed off too soon, or say Skyquake. I mean, sometimes a makeshift it makes sense, but it can be a bit inconsistent with who dies and who doesn't. For example, Megatron. Like, obviously, you need him to stick around because you're going to need to sell the toys, but at least they made sense with why Megatron would come back because of the Dark Energon influence that he has. Like, he depends on it immensely. On top of that, Optimus Prime makes sense to keep him around because he's needed to be one of the main parts of the show. Now, I'm pretty sure there were fans that hated seeing Bumblebee come back when like they established like some characters die, they die, but Bumblebee comes back. But it makes sense because he fell into a pool of energon that revived him, and it was meant to be a secret that he kept for pretty much the entire episode of the fact that he was going to come back in some way, shape, or form. Like it's a good twist. It's not like a stupid Ryan Johnson subvert your expectations sort of
No,
twist.
it's
It's mostly
not the
just
popular Deus Ex Machina.
yeah,
It is actual
it's mostly just
plot
him
crime.
saying that's one problem some people might have with Prime. Another problem some might have with the show is perhaps the CGI's budget, because unfortunately we can't have big casts. And we got that with Cyberverse, and I guess Robots in Disguise because of the cheaper budget, but for Transformers Prime, the fact that the shows were expensive to begin with, almost as expensive as Beast Wars was in the 90s, meant that that most of the areas were isolated, which means not as many humans populating the streets in some instances, or replicated car models, or very few characters. Like you can easily make clones of the Viacons. You can easily like tweak Predacon uh, DNA artifact designs or whatever for the tubes, but you can't easily make a brand new model immediately. You need to either delete an old model or just retool it and give it a new head sculpt. So that's why we have Dreadwing after Skyquake showed up and died. And it's also why we don't have the Seekers that are Skyward with Thundercracker because we already have Seekers in the form of Dreadwing and Skyquake. On top of that, we don't have too many Autobot characters. Like I'm pretty sure they wanted to add Ironhide in some way, but because there's like um, either it's because he was going to confuse kids for existing in the show when Ironhide died in Dark of the Moon, or because it had to do with the fact that the character didn't fit in the show in terms of the roles, because the roles meant for, I guess, Bulkhead better than Ironhide. He was removed, but it would have been kind of cool if they actually added more characters, but I'm fine with the characters we did get. I just wish that some of the ones got more focus than they normally have. One final problem I did have was the fact that there were some ideas that would have been cool to see, like getting more Predacons, but I had a feeling it would have been nice to at least see stuff like more of a connection to the games, because the connection between the Cybertron games and the Prime cartoon is vague. I would love to at least see some characters that were from Prime also meet the characters that were shown in the Cybertron games. For example, I'm positive they wanted to add Grimlock because the comics that tied into Beast Hunters show the Dinobots from Fall of Cybertron meeting the Prime characters after the events of Season 3. It would have been great to see those guys. Also, it would have been pretty nice to at least see the likes of Bruticus, basically, because, most fans would think, oh, like, this is just some sort of kids show. There's not much to like about it, even though Transformers Prime is not your ordinary kids show. It would have been great to encourage these guys to see the show even more, even if it's just including the game's famous Dinobots and Combaticons. But what they've done was already good enough for me, and I'm very happy to say that Transformers Prime is a fantastic TV show. It sucks that we haven't had a peak Transformers TV show since Prime, because all the other ones have been kind of lackluster. And sure, they have their own merits, but I feel Prime is a much stronger show, much like how the comics haven't been as good as what we got with Marvel from the 80s and a bit of the 90s, or how most of the Transformers movies made after probably Age of Extinction haven't been either fluid in terms of storytelling or creative, which is a problem that I had with The Last Night for the former and Bumblebee for the latter, because I miss when Transformers stuff felt like not just great with storytelling, but also going all out with the creativity that they had. So we've already went through a lot with Prime, and I'm happy to say that Transformers Prime gets a 9.5 out of 10.
Whoa!
Damn! 9.5. That's a high one.
I mean, it deserves it because, like we mentioned, War for Cybertron Netflix's first season, Siege, was already underwhelming. Despite what they had, it was still just an example of why I would much prefer a longer show with better thought out character development and episode pacing. And Cyberverse, I like Cyberverse, but I can't help but admit that there's things I feel that could have been better done if they did a few choices that it didn't involve trying to be a little less strict with their time limits per episode. I mean, the fact that we get a conclusion with Megatron X showing up at the end, and he was there for a few moments before getting his ass kicked by Windblade fucking up his Matrix, was underwhelming compared to the few episodes we had that involved Unicron.
Yeah.
It's
9.5. All right. I think I might have to check it out. I'm putting it on my list of shit I need to watch.
absolutely. And I hope everyone else watching this episode sees the show, because if you haven't seen it yet, you definitely deserve it. Plus, on a side note, I'm very happy that they're finally making action figures, or rather re-releasing some of the Transformers Prime stuff we didn't get in the US, because we didn't get a breakdown, and the Megatron we got wasn't as cool as the one that Japan got. So I'm very happy that Hasbro Pulse is finally putting out the Voyager breakdown and Jet Viacon in the set, as well as Megatron Darkness on his own sets with his own arms microns, which are a Japanese thing. I think we've already talked a lot about Transformers Prime, but bottom line, I'm glad they're releasing toys tying with a great TV show, much like how the first X-Men movie is getting Marvel Legends based on the first great movie. So, yeah, that's all we have to say about Transformers Prime. Next up, we'll be talking about Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, a direct-to-video movie set in the DC animated universe and is a tie-in to the TV show with a similar title. Now, this, along with the likes of Sub-Zero, were one of the few movies in the DC animated universe to have a theatrical release. In fact, the only one was Mask of the Phantasm, which makes sense because that movie didn't do as well in the theaters, although it's still popular because, of course. And while that movie gets a lot of attention, I do feel that Sub-Zero and Return of the Joker don't get as much attention, but I do feel that Batman Beyond Return that Joker does deserve some attention outside of the DC Animated Universe fan base. What do you guys think of that?
Completely agree, especially after rewatching Return of the. It's really one of the better Batman films, in my opinion. It knows the character of Batman, it knows the character of Joker, and it really worked, in my opinion. I took some
qualities. It's still so modern. What I mean?
Yeah, it's
Yep.
like the animation too. It works with the type of film this is. Like, it's not nearly like the animation we're used to nowadays, where it's so much better, but it's like that classic, like Bruce Timm type animation.
I think the Bruce Timm animation is still good. Like, it's a bit stiff, it's a bit slow, but it works well, I'd say.
It works so well. Honestly, it's only like an hour-long movie. It's really not that long, and I think it's the perfect runtime. I only had one gripe with it, and that's just the ending. I thought, but from the beginning to almost the ending, I thought it was really well done. I mean, just the opening where we find out Joker's back and you see Bruce's reaction to seeing the Joker alive, it's just like, you can tell he's like actually afraid. Like, this is his main number one villain, and you can see by the look in his eyes that he's just different. Like, and Terry doesn't understand this yet, which is also interesting because he just thinks, oh, the Joker's just some guy who deals out play cards, trick balloons, and trick flowers.
He's different.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the Joker is very sinister as a character, especially in this universe.
Exactly, which is interesting because this is in the Beyond universe, and it's been years since Joker's been active. So it's like almost Joker's become like a myth, kind of. Like, Terry doesn't even know the horrors and atrocities Joker's committed. Only Batman, Barbara, and Tim know, the ones who were involved with it. And you see when they talk about it that it clearly fucked them up. And then so there were, I guess that's true, what I think the movie did really well. Also, the flashback sequence. That's my favorite part of this film.
Absolutely. It's the most memorable.
I agree.
Oh, depressing as fuck, man.
It's done so well that it's like, that could be the ending to the Batman and Joker dynamic.
Yeah.
If that's how it ended, I'd be okay with it. That was done so well. Like, the fact that, one, it takes place in Arkham Asylum, and Batman and Barbara both walk in to Harley singing a nursery rhyme, making this creepy-ass tone as they're walking through the abandoned asylum. And then they finally burst into the door, and there's Joker and Harley sitting, and then an immediate tone change. Like, it's no longer creepy because now Joker's here, and it's just crazy how by Joker showing up, like, he can immediately change the tone of that dark and dreary asylum to like, oh, look who's here! You just mistook this, Batman! Like that's the power this character has.
Even with that sort of change in tone, like, you still get a feeling of uncomfort because this is the Joker we're talking about. Like, he's not trying to like change things up. He can easily take it back to that sort of creepiness if he can.
Yeah. Dude. I remember also how traumatic it was for me when I was young, the expressions of all the characters that Tim Ray.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, just the whole storyline of creating that, like, wow, it really was more fucked up than I remembered.
Yeah.
Like, I found out that they had to make a different. There's two versions. There's an uncut version, and then the version that was released.
I was about
And
to
the
ask you
uncut
that.
version has all this way more darker shit in it.
Yeah,
Like,
I watched the uncut.
the uncut version is so much better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course it is. Like, it's almost required by law.
It makes sense why.
Also, I gotta give props to Harley. That Harley Quinn, even though she's in it for like just that amount of time, I'm sorry. I get they're trying to make Harley more advanced and give her own character, and I'm for that. But the Harley in that movie and how she's acting with the Joker, that's the true Harley.
Like the best dynamics.
Like she's like literally the one, like literally after seeing what they've done to Tim, and then they're fighting, and then she just can break the tension of a fight scene, just being like, "Sweetie, go get mommy's bazooka." It's just like, how can you add humor to something after? It's just only she can be able to do that. I think Arlene Sorkin, she's always been the voice of Harley.
She is Harley Quinn.
Exactly.
Well, she's a Harley Quinn, but she is one of the best parts of the DC animated universe overall.
I mean, hey, they literally invented the character because of the animated series. Like, that's where she came from.
But it's also great to see that she's still in these other like adventures outside of the normal show.
What do you mean?
Like, what I mean is I appreciate that she's still involved with something like this, even after like having her normally pop up in the standard Batman, the animated series show, or the new Batman Adventures, and all that.
No, her popularity has skyrocketed, if anything.
Exactly.
So, and I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff they can do with Harley as well. There's a lot to her character and her psyche and all that. And I did watch season 1 of the Harley Quinn show, and they kind of did that, and I kind of enjoyed that, but the overall tone of it I didn't love, so I stopped watching it. But
makes sense.
I heard there's a huge improvement. Second, you should definitely watch it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard it is miles better than the first.
Oh, shit.
Well,
all right.
I don't know if we'll review the Harley Quinn show at some point, but what else did you guys like about Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker?
There's the one other thing. It's just when Joker finally like shows him the Our Family Memories, where he shows what he did to Robin and how he tortured him to get him to become into like the Joker kid version.
Yeah.
It's just those moments when Batman and Joker are alone is where you can truly see how deep their relationship is. And
yeah, and it ain't pretty.
Exactly. It's
kind of is,
wicked
like,
fucked up.
The contrast between a man who's lost everything and another man who has lost different things for different reasons, like his sanity, compared to the other man who has pretty much lost what it means to pretty much be human in some ways. Like, he's been stuck being Batman for so long. The fact that he continues seeing this sort of crap from the Joker is just like traumatizing to the unprepared.
Joker's goal is to break Batman, or make him break the rule that he won't kill him. And even in this scene, Batman is furious. He even tries to throw a knife at the Joker in one instance, trying to kill him. And then he's like, in the Kevin Conroy voice, he's like, "I'll break you." And even Joker's like, "Oh, come on now. If you had the sense to do that, you would have done it years ago." And then he takes his chance. And Joker has Batman on his knees and totally would have killed him if not for Tim able to overcome whatever Joker did to him and end up shooting Joker in the chest with the dummy gun.
Yeah.
Like, just so
never
poetic.
did I think that a dummy gun would actually be like helpful, that sort of thing. Like, normally they make it just for a joke, but the fact he can stab someone with it is just holy shit.
Yeah, no, it's like, how many people has he killed with that gun? Like, he literally killed someone at the beginning of the movie. That one bonk guy who was on the clown gang. And then Poetic Justice when he's impaled with it as well.
You could definitely see that again.
And then also, just the flash. Okay, so now that we're done with the flashback, that's definitely highlighted the movie. And then even the reveal of what's really going on with how Tim Drake's being controlled by the Joker through the microchip. I thought that was really done well too. Didn't see that coming, honestly. Well, first time I watched, I was like, what the hell's going on? But it made sense, and it made sense why the Joker was acting like the Joker from all those years ago, because it technically was him, even though it's also not.
Yep.
But just the movie knows the character of the Joker. They know the relationship with Batman, and you can see that just through the fear Bruce finds when Joker is back. And then even when Joker comes into the Batcave and is like, oh, I know who you are, Bruce. Like,
it feels like it's just like at the top of their game in terms of the writing.
Yeah,
it also feels
exactly.
good
Like, they
to
know
see
Mark
it.
Hamill and Kevin Conroy. They know they
Yeah,
have this dynamic, and they had the right story to go with it. And I really think they hit their marks with this, which is why I give this movie a rating of 8 out of 10.
same.
Yeah, same.
Like personally, I feel kind of burnt out with all the praise that Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill and the DC animated universe has, because at this point it's sort of like the MMPR of DC Comics, where that's the only thing that people like recognize. And yeah, I'll admit it does deserve the recognition,
Yeah,
even if I
I
find it to
get
be a
what
bit
you're
overrated.
saying.
But that being said, I think Batman Beyond, especially Return of the Joker, is the highlight of the entire universe, because it puts the iconic incarnations of these characters in a different view that still feels like them, but in a different lens in terms of what they've been through. Plus, it's beautifully dark and definitely shows that this was a time when kids' cartoons could get away with some stuff, even if it took them an alternate cut where they showed off the dummy gun stabbing Joker.
I mean, yeah, it was a kids' movie, and that scene and a bunch of other stuff from the uncut version is why it had to be cut, because they needed it to be PG and not PG-13, because it was Batman Beyond and based off the TV show.
Yeah, but thankfully, it's not as jarring as of a contrast to say like how anime would normally change the context of some stuff, like trying to make it minimally, um,
No, God, no.
like minimally censored, like or hugely censored for the silliest of reasons. Like Batman Beyond is sort of like the 2003 Ninja Turtles show, where it does as much as it can, not as much as people would hope for it to be. I mean, I'm not someone that would really want to see Batman Beyond like say f bombs, but I do feel Terry McGinnis being Batman Beyond did what he could. I do appreciate Joker being still in character despite being in a darker tone. Of course, it makes sense for this universe. I'm fine for him to be different in other universes, but I do like to see what they've done with this Joker for the DC Anime universe, taking him from like the more traditional looks of him around the '90s to what we get in this movie.
It wasn't a traditional look. They changed it up a little bit with his hair being like slicked back, the purple like
it's
long slick robe or whatever.
Like he's much more sinister here, and I'm very glad that they changed it up for this film, because I know the animated Joker from the '90s is iconic, but I like to see them change things up a notch, especially for this movie. And it's a perfect way to change things up for the DC animated universe, if you ask me.
I see. My thing with this movie is that it could have gone totally wrong. The fact that they were bringing in Joker, who is Batman's number one big bad, and they were going to have this other Batman go up against him. I'm sure people weren't too pleased with that in the beginning, but they knew the character and they knew how to like make him a menace, even in this time shift. Now that it's in the future, like just the opening scene where he's like, you see him for the first time, where they're at the table and he's at the one end completely covered in the shadow, and all you see are his red eyes and his smile. It's
exactly.
They knew that they know what they're doing, and they did good take with it.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
8 out of 10. 8 out of 10.
Yep. Batman Beyond Return of the Joker is outstanding and might be my favorite piece of the DC animated universe overall. It feels so good to watch a movie like this from the DC animated universe without some DC know-it-all act like this
Shut
sort of
up, check
universe.
mark.
Yeah, the same check marks that think Batman sitting next to a kid in a chair or in a swing is the only way to write Batman. Even though they don't know jack squat about that aside from that one scene. But anyway, fuck those losers. I love Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, but then again, I already love the stuff we talked about so far. And finally, we'll be talking about Toy Story, the original film from Pixar, the first one that started it all. Not just for the franchise, but for a huge slew of CG animated movies, even ones outside of Pixar's releases, because, oh boy, this pretty much spawned the likes of
this was the movie that put Pixar on the fucking map.
Yeah, and the
Without
entire
this,
genre
Pixar would have
overall.
been screwed.
Of all the shows we've talked about so far, I think we can all agree that Toy Story is the one that's most familiar to our childhood selves. Because, man, like,
I mean, I was one of the first movies I think I remembered watching as my mom put it on. I mean, it's like the fact that also, was it released again? Like
1995.
95. Like it came out before I was born. Like it's crazy.
I had a feeling some of you guys were like born after the movie's release. Even so, you still feel like you've like been around when the movie came out because of how close it is to your childhood.
I mean, it's just such a nostalgic film. I mean, going back and looking at it, like, it's just crazy, too, to see how much it developed over the years. Like, this Toy Story, like, the Pixar animation is still amazing, but, like, it's a little rough. Like, this is the first time they did it, so, like, there's some rough places where you can see that.
Yeah.
And then you go to, like, Toy Story 4, and then it's like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's
Like,
definitely mind-blowing. Though I will say the humans kind of, like, surprised me a bit because I wasn't used to seeing how fucking realistic they looked.
It's just crazy how much better the animation got from each movie. The first one, like, started it off, and I'll be fair. I don't think the first one is my favorite out of all the Toy Stories. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I still love it regardless. I mean, I love the films equally, maybe for a little less than the other three, but I enjoyed it still. Maybe maybe Andy was a little rough. Maybe Sid didn't look right, but maybe Scud was a little funny looking. But at least the toys were well animated for what they can do. And they gave the feeling of, like, they gave the feels or, like, the look of the toys that they would normally be if they were actual toys. And they are actual toys. I mean, okay, Woody and Buzz were made-up characters before the films, during the film's release. But Mr. Potato Head feels like how a Mr. Potato Head would. Ham feels like how a Ham piggy bank would. Slinky Dog feels like how a Slinky would be. Like, the
Pixar team did a great job with designing the characters and then giving them each their own, like, type of personality. Like, they weren't the same. Like, even though they're all toys, each one of the toys had their own separate personality. And I loved that. It made it so much better. It made me able to sympathize with the characters, even though they are toys. But, like, Rex, Rex is easily one of my favorites.
I like
so
Rex
funny.
Too.
Yeah, he's just always
honestly, like,
it's the Chicken Man.
Yeah. But
Sequel Rex was MVP. He was so funny.
Oh my god.
I love these characters overall. Even some of the more obscure ones are still stuck in my head. I mean, I obviously know Woody. I obviously know Buzz. I know, like, everyone else. But I know some of the more obscure characters too, like the Snake. I know the Robot. I know Rocky. Because
Wheezy. Oh, Wheezy was one of my favorites.
Like
the Penguin.
Yeah. It's like
their
designs stand out from one another. And that's why I like the animation for Toy Story. Even if the first film may have been a bit more primitive than the others, at least they made sure the characters that you see the most were well made. I mean, Andy,
Oh yeah,
like I said, looks a little
it's
funny.
totally more primitive than the others, but like it was 1995. I mean, the fact that it still looks as it does in 95 and that was the animation,
Yeah,
like that's
pioneers of
At
adults.
least, at
like
least the
Pixar was
characters,
always ahead of its time.
yeah, and at least they knew how to make sure that they felt timeless in some ways. Maybe not timeless as in 2019 timeless, but still hold up surprisingly well. I mean, like they're not that stiff. The characters aren't as like it's not like a huge shift from like Beast Wars to Prime, but
Yeah.
at least the characters were still natural looking in some ways. Like the lip syncing was good. The eyes, maybe the eyes, the way they animate is a little funny, but at least
Oh my god, yeah, the animation was beautiful. I'm just talking about more just like the actual settings of like the rooms. Like
yeah,
I'm comparing it like just because of when I still think Pixar is leading in animation out of all of a lot of studios. After watching Toy Story 4 especially, just how the fact that that was animation and it wasn't real life, like the rain, it was
Yeah.
incredible. And
Yeah.
even in the first one, it's just like wow. Like
but
you can
even
see
if-
the thought and the process they put into it all. Like nothing was just generated randomly. Like the clouds in Andy's room, like the claw in the arcade place, Sid's room with all the creepy. We have to talk about that too, because
Like, some of this
that's
stuff,
a little scary.
like some of this stuff is kind of like I'll admit that the settings do look a little almost like test areas in a way. Like Andy's almost reminds me of the vaporwave VHS tape reels of CGI, but it still looks good
Yeah.
nonetheless. But what makes it work well is the fact that there's everything else that fills it up nicely, and also the fact that the characters in front of you are still the main focus. Like, Woody
You
and
know
Buzz
what's really
are still
crazy
animated
is that
naturally.
the fact that these characters are toys and that they are animated and that they were able to be animated in such like a lively way where you like almost like so personified,
Yeah,
like with Woody and his arms, just how like his arms are able to move around like however he wants. Each of the characters had special quirks and were unique. Like Rex walked a certain way, like what's the piggy bank's name?
Ham?
Oh shit.
Ham had
Ham,
method
yes.
of moving. Like,
Even him, like it's just they all had a special quality about them, and it's just Pixar clearly knows what they're looking for and that they want to have the good characters, because if you can have characters that people will enjoy and can like either sympathize with or just have a good time watching, that's what you need. That's like part of the thing. And then Toy Story also even has not a bad story, if I must say, about Buzz thinking he's a real toy and then finding out that he's not, and like how he has to grow
yeah,
and accept that. Like it's a coming of age story kind of.
yeah, kind of weird too because Buzz was a fairly new toy, and
Yeah.
some would say that he's like way too young, but it's kind of weird to say that because he sounds and acts like an adult in the film. But in terms of his age, like he's the youngest toy that was ever made. But it works well in
Yeah.
terms of the story, and I like the dynamic that these characters have. Even if it's mainly just Woody and Buzz that get the attention, like they know how to make the other characters memorable. We already mentioned how Rex is a goofy T-Rex, how Ham is sort of like the kind of a know-it-all in some ways. Mr. Potato Head being sarcastic, being a bit of a prick, but they know how to make these
Exactly.
characters stand out for one another. Like, sure, they eventually like make the character templates for the cliches we see in some generic films, but thankfully, a handful of big IPs know how to distinguish themselves from Toy Story's cast, like with Shrek and I guess Ice Age. But Toy Story does still do a good job with its characters, and the sequels are also no exception. Like Jessie is more than just a gender swap Woody. She has her own personality.
Jessie has her whole backstory too. That's so sad.
Yeah.
Oh my god, with Emily. Oh my lord, I was like, why is this bitch just getting rid of her? Just gonna leave her on the side of a road.
It makes sense as to why she freaked out when she got upset and she didn't want to go into the box.
Yeah, and then it was awful. Like this Pixar knows how to write a good story. They know how to have some. Just think about it. Finding Nemo, the mom dies and all the babies die. Up.
Yep.
He had his wife, and then they find out they can't have kids, and then she dies, and then he's left all alone, old. Like Pixar movies always have to have some sad thing, and then they show you that even though as dark as it gets, it will get better.
Right.
Plot twist though. Baby Yoda is the ex.
Yeah. Baby Yoda kind of went crazy.
That must be Baby Yoda's primitive form before he became what he was. If this was some sort of stupid Disney franchise connectivity theory that verified to make on Twitter. But back to a more genuine Disney property, that being Toy Story. I like the fact that they know how to make the stories feel tragic, showing that these are more than just kids' movies. Like Pixar is a universal franchise that you can enjoy. I mean, even at an age where I'm more used to seeing stuff that's more story driven, in terms of Transformers Prime or perhaps something like Breaking Bad, where it's more so suited for our current age, I can still enjoy Toy Story because they at least keep you interested with the story. It's more than just characters that are just running around and doing something. Like how they would make you think in the trailers. There is a reason why they do certain things.
That, and they stick the landing on all of the humor. The humor in those movies is so well done. When they think Woody pushed Buzz out the window and then he's gone, and then they finally come back and they're like, oh, look, here he comes again. He's trying to get rid of RC now. And they push him off, and it's like, no, he was trying to get back on the car.
And it also led to to Woody indirectly messing up RC and the car.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, oh, look what he's trying to do now. It's just, those movies bring such a nostalgia, too.
I think Toy Story is definitely the best franchise they have. And the humor is well managed. So,
it's I think even Pixar knows that. Yeah. Toy Story was their first brand. They've known each Toy Story. It's got to be moving. It's got to have an impact. Right. And I think they've done that with each one.
I love the impact that they each did. With Toy Story 2, they basically took the characters in different situations or different settings. Woody is in an environment where he pretty much realizes that he's this big star of a now dead TV show, and Buzz and friends need to try and look for him.
They end up in a giant super mall, also crossing the highway underneath traffic cones. So
super
that
mall,
goes
you mean
real well.
Al's Toy Barn? I don't remember there being a super mall. I remember there being this toy store, but there was no super mall.
Oh, okay. My
bad. You had the airport and this.
The airport was cool. And I remember the first time I went to Mexico to see what it was like at a young age, and it was kind of like a funny way to connect my real life with a piece of fiction. And honestly, saying that Toy Story 2 meant a lot to me because I went to Mexico on that trip, and seeing the airport was a sweet experience, both in real life and in the film. Still better than how people compare, epic battles in modern films to elections and all that sort of garbage. But yeah, I like how they handled the setting of Toy Story 2 overall.
You also just gotta think about just how these movies progressed as they went on too. I think
Yeah.
Some people would think that, oh, another one? Like, what are they gonna, like, me, when the fourth one came out, I was like, really? They're making another? What are they gonna do?
With me personally, let's, yeah,
Dude,
like before we
they're
talk about the
not
fourth,
bad.
let's talk about the third, because
Okay.
this feels like the one where they changed stuff in a big way. Toy Story 2 is all about expanding the world of the Toy Story franchise as we know it. Toy Story 3, on the other hand, is about changing the story in a way we hadn't expected. First of all, the characters realize that Andy is much older, and he's going to college. Little did he know that he's trying to store them, but then they realize that they get themselves in some sort of situation that involves them going to a daycare. And they think, oh, like some of them think, oh, we're gonna like be here. Andy doesn't need us, but Woody still has his mindset of trying to look for the boy because most of the toys don't have the same sort of connection to Andy as much as he does. Like, in a way,
Andy's going to college, so
yeah,
he's a little grown up now.
But in a way, like Woody is almost like a father figure of sorts to Andy. He wants to be there for all the things Andy's done, much like our parents would. Whether it's us getting our first car, or graduating from high school or college, or getting our first job, like he wants to be there for all the big things Andy's done.
That's the so incredible part about these movies is that they made, like, it's like the toy cares so much about the person as well. Like, he cares so much about Andy. Like, and the fact that, like, they create this relationship that you can have this with your toys as well, that, oh yeah, your toys are, they can just come alive whenever, and they stay with you because they're, sounds a little weird, but they want to be played with. I mean,
obviously not in real life because there's so much stuff, and I don't know where to begin in terms of
no,
like, but
yes,
yeah,
but like
I get
it
what you
gives
mean.
the imagination of that to these kids watching it, and it's like brings almost stories to life where, like in the first movie where Andy's playing with the toys and like filming his own like movie. That's like basically what this is. It's like somebody created a movie about these toys, and
yeah. Although in the first movie, it was just mainly him using his, like, it was just the boxes, whereas in the third movie, we actually get to see his imagination be
okay,
real.
Was it the third one?
Yeah, with all like the video camera footage of him hanging out with his toys and enjoying them. Like that was
that's the one movie with the red monkeys, right?
Yeah,
in the third one,
and it helped you like catch up to what's been happening between the second and third movies. Like that was just like ingenious of a choice on Pixar's part, because what if nobody saw the first two movies? I mean, obviously you should, but what if you never seen the first two movies and you see the third one as your first? And they at least give you an idea of what happened before we get to the fact that Andy's not going to college.
Mm-hmm. But it is necessary, and if you think it from a writing point of view, it is all executed, and also the direction they give with that scene takes you back to the other two movies, and now how they reflect the time.
What are you trying to say?
It's just,
sorry, I just made a huge creation and nothing was recorded, right?
I suppose.
Okay, wait. I don't know how to solve this. Hold on.
Oh man, I wonder what device he's recording it off of.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be like
a phone.
I wonder if he's using like headphones or a mic.
Probably.
Or if he's just using his phone, that could be it too. All right, I mean, we got a little more to record, I would say. I mean, should we just power through?
Yeah.
I'll try not to turn up here.
All right, just try to continue looking for a method to make yourself sound clear, but we'll continue talking, no problem. Like I like the fact that we get second and third movie we have villains that are toys. In the first movie, we obviously had Sid Phillips and his dog, the mutant toys weren't really villains. They were just like wanting to help the other guys because of their problems. They wanted revenge against Sid. Toy Story
Yeah.
2, we had the likes of Al, the Chicken Man, but I don't really consider him to be much of a villain. I mean, he's not obviously much of a villain, but he looks kind of funny though. He looks like Movie Bob, that
I'd
fat fuck.
I'd say he was like more of a like just a goon kind of.
Yeah,
Like
indirectly
he's
involved with the events.
he's a villain because he took Woody, but it's like that's all he really did.
He's not as
The Prospector was worse.
yeah, like he hated the fact. Like
I
understand
hated that guy.
Like okay, I get it. This Mario cosplayer wanted to go up against Space Toys for the fact that his show got canceled, but Stinky Pete, I like your character, but I don't understand why you have a beef against Space Toys. You have beef against the people that cancel your show abruptly. Now I don't know how they filmed
Yeah, it's
stuff
like
back then, because I'm pretty sure TV shows were filmed at a different pace than they are now. But like, come on, Stinky Pete, don't have hate against Space Toys. Space Toys are innocent.
no, I know he took it too far.
Yeah.
He just wanted to be preserved in a museum forever.
Still though, he had this sort of like pure, honest, sort of humble nature to him before he showed off his true colors to Woody. Like I didn't see it. He looked like your typical character that just
Yeah, bro.
like
A common theme throughout Toy Story movies. Just think a Lotso too.
yeah.
Like
Like,
they do good with their villains. Also, I will
I
say.
think Lotso was worse off because Stinky
Oh,
Pete
don't get
didn't
me
like how his
started on
character was
Lotso.
represented in Woody's Roundup, and he had beef with Space Toys. Lotso pretty much hated the fact that he was abandoned and was replaced, and he wanted to hate humans. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was possible for him. He could easily like wipe out the entire human race if it was somehow possible for him to do such a thing.
He totally would have.
I mean, if he
That's
was
like
around
not even a
Sid-
question.
If
He
was
had
around
that
Sid-
creepy baby doll. He had his whole army.
Yeah, I especially liked the mantis-looking guy who had muscles on him. Like he's half bug, half human. Like he looked awesome. And his name is Twitch. I also like.
I haven't watched the movie in a while. I forgot. There's some creepy characters they created in those movies. In the fourth one with the creepy
we'll get to that in a
dolls,
bit.
and the third one, the babies.
Like okay, Babyface, like Lazy Eye or whatever his name is, Big Baby.
Yeah.
Babyface is the spider head. Like Big Baby
Oh,
looked a little
okay.
uncomfortable because like baby dolls are kind of a weird thing to begin with. Like you're not used to seeing them. They're kind of weird, especially when you're more used to action figures. But I thought
Oh, you know
that
what it was?
the
The monkey with the symbols.
That thing was like always like a fucked up alarm. I mean,
Dude, I was having like a heart attack watching that scene. I was like, oh my god, he's gonna sound the alarm.
Thankfully, they were able to stop it in time because that thing almost made me want to like blast it away if it was possible because I don't want to run into that sort of thing.
Oh my
Like,
god.
It's almost like the thing's almost like a fucking time bomb, if you ask me.
Oh, and yeah, he watched everything.
Still though,
I know, Toy Story 3 took it dark.
yeah, especially considering how the toys tried to survive from the kids. Like I know they're like little kids, but still, little kids are a lot more destructive than Andy was. Like,
That's why you give them different toys.
plus, I was about to mention the fact that at least Lotso's gang, which consisted of Twitch, Crunch, and Sparks, they looked kind of cool. I mean, Babyface was a different thing, but I dug the way Twitch looked with his body being an insect and human sort of guy. I dug the way Sparks looked as a retro robot, and Crunch was a cool rock lord sort of guy. But yeah, Lotso, biggest dick in the entire Pixar series, if you ask me.
Oh my God, it's just the fact that they were on that conveyor belt about to be incinerated, and then Lotso climbed up those fat fucking ladder.
Push the
And
button,
then
they said.
he was about to press it, and
Yeah,
then he was
he
like,
said-
"Where's your kid now?" And I was like, "You son of a bitch!"
Yeah, it's like that one Captain America comic pic where he pretty much says stuff like "Hail Hydra" and shocked a lot of people. Like it more so made me think of the Superman edit where Superman said "Save yourself" when they put Superman over Captain America, and like that's how I thought about Lotso because you're expecting him to save them all, but he didn't. Like
Yeah, he's just like, "Fuck you!"
like you guys are still simping a human being. Pathetic. He just ran off, but he thankfully got what he deserved by being put in front of a garbage truck that Sid operated. And
Yeah,
he was asking for it.
What he fucking deserved.
But
He, ugh.
it was
And
still
then when
good
they were
scene.
just all gonna die, I was like, "Oh my God, are they actually all about to die right now?"
Yeah, it's like
I was.
the fact that they're holding their hands together just shows that no matter what, they'll all be together still, regardless of what happens.
I know they really are good movies. They really nail down a theme as well. But yeah, no, that one. Oh, and then you get the depressing finale for 3 at the end with Andy
Right.
when they all.
It's
like again, I didn't. Toy Story 4 was good, but
we'll get to that in a bit.
Toy Story 3's ending was just.
It wasn't just a happy ending. Like it was just pretty much showing off a sign of saying goodbye to someone.
It's like goodbye and moving on, because that's what life is.
Yeah, like I could
It's
almost
so
imagine if there was a
sad.
narrator. Like if there was a narrator, they could almost imagine him saying that we may not always be with those that we've been with for so long, but no matter what happens, we'll always make new friends on the way who won't replace your loved ones, but will simply add to those that you've cared about in your history or something like that. Because while Andy may not be a kid anymore, the fact that these toys will have someone else to play with for as long as they exist is something eternal for them. Kind of like how when we die and get old, Santa will still live on as an eternal idea for kids to look up to, if you ask me.
This is the beauty of film. It's just the fact that we're able to get these such deep and raw feelings and portrayals from just literally toys animated. Like the fact that they're able to personify all these human emotions is insane, and like it works so well. I mean, I remember being in the theater watching 3. I was like, oh my gosh, just like it was so sad. Oh my God, when did Toy Story 3 come out?
10 years ago.
2010.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 9 years later was Toy Story 4.
Now, like, Toy Story 4 is a very interesting movie to talk about because I remember that was the movie I liked the most from Disney. I think y'all noticed by now, but I think 2019 was my least favorite year regarding Disney because it definitely showed off not just the fact that they got a lot more than they had any right to in terms of money and attention, but also the fact that they were getting away with so much mediocrity. Aside from the constant MCU focus and the live action remakes and the underwhelming Star Wars stuff, the only thing I found enjoyable was
it's ridiculous.
The only thing I found worthwhile was just Toy Story 4. 1 year later, is it still a good movie? Maybe without the
I need to rewatch it.
Like maybe if you took away the fact that it was like the more genuine, more honest, more natural movie released by Disney, perhaps not. But adding that just makes me appreciate Toy Story 4 even more because unlike the other things that they've put out, I think Toy Story 4 feels a lot more humble for what it is.
See, my feeling or my 2 cents on it is I thought it was just going to be a cash grab. It's like, oh, Toy Story, it's been 9 years. Maybe we can get a new demographic of kids into this now so we can start over. That's how I thought it was going to be. And I went to the film and I was pleased I was completely incorrect because it just was a film about Woody and it wrapped up his story so well. Like, again, so sad at the end.
Yeah, like, you may not really need it because if you already seen like the other stuff,
That's
but
what I said.
it feels like a bonus in a way. Almost like a big epilogue to the Toy Story franchise.
Yes, I totally agree. We didn't need it, but we have it, and it was good, and that's the true ending right there. I thought it was 3, but you know what?
I enjoyed
really
seeing Bo Peep's return. I mean, I know people like to criticize other people for criticizing female characters, but I think she is a better female character than most of the female characters involved with Disney's properties from their Star Wars and their MCU stuff, if you ask me.
Just the fact that she, from Toy Story 1, Bo Peep, to Toy Story 4, and you've seen how much she's changed and developed, like, you can just tell they know how to write characters well, even though they're just toys. It's really something Pixar has a gift for.
That being said, I didn't like how Bonnie was rejecting Woody somehow, and
for Forky.
For Forky. Plus, it made me think: wait, what if Andy decides to meet her one day, and he realizes that Woody's nowhere to be seen?
The one thing with Toy Story 4 is that it wasn't Toy Story, in my opinion. It was more Woody's story.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I thought we were going to get more, like, Rex, Mr. Potato Head, Buzz, like, those type of hijinks, but...
Well, we did get a bit of Buzz. And while it was good stuff, I do feel it kind of reminds me of how Patrick in some recent SpongeBob seasons was written, because...
Exactly, he was, like, sidelined.
Like, plus, he didn't act like how I expected him to act, because Buzz Lightyear, even if he wasn't as much of a serious character as you would expect him to be in some situations, he kind of acted a bit of a lost individual, because he always relied too much on his buttons to say stuff for him, almost like he doesn't know how to think on his own. Like, in the first movie, he was pretty, like, capable. Like, he was pretty smart. Same could be said for the second and third movies.
Well, he thought he was not a toy.
Yeah, but he was, in general, he still acted smart. Same could be said for the second movie. Yep. Third movie...
I think as they evolved, they got smarter and just...
Third movie, well, he had his memory wiped from acting all Spanish and beforehand acting...
Oh my god, that's right. They turned the Spanish mode on!
But I think that might explain why he didn't act the same as he did in the first two movies. It's weird, because I love Buzz Lightyear a lot. You can probably tell because, well, every time I think of Disney, I don't think of Mickey Mouse, I just think of Buzz and Woody. Woody's still the same character. Buzz sort of feels a bit more like he's been written weirdly, just for the sake of making him act a bit more humorous, but it was alright. I mean, nowhere near as bad as, say, seasons 4 through 8 Patrick Star, compared to seasons 1 through 3 in movie Patrick Star.
In my opinion, Toy Story, it's always been about the toys and mainly Buzz and Woody's dynamic. That was what the first movie basically started with. And then the second one, I think, did that more and showed how they have improved with time. And the third one did that as well also. The fourth one was where I was like, this is more Woody's movie.
Yeah. Although you can say that Buzz Lightyear did have a movie in the form of the Buzz Lightyear Star Command film, which we should talk about some other time.
Honestly,
let's be honest, we'll talk about that some other time.
I thought the first Toy Story also was more Buzz's movie.
Yeah, it was like evened out. Like
It's just because it's like Buzz is finally becoming, I guess, self-aware, and he's learning that he can't do everything he thought he can do, and that he is just a toy. He's not a super savior and a star commander.
Yeah, pretty much what Woody's been yelling at him about. Whether it's him pretty much saying stuff like, "You are a toy!" Or him pretty much like, pretty much shrugging off the fact that he would actually act like this even when they're in Sid's house. I've set my laser from stun to kill. Yeah, right. And if anything gets worse, we can blink him to death.
There's so many good memories and just moments in these movies.
Yeah.
If I was rating all of them, because I think that's how you have. I really think Toy Story is like a full thing, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like it's a whole like story in its own right.
Me personally, I'd pick the first 3 as their own series and add 4 as like a bonus,
and then
almost like
4.
DLC in some ways. Because I'll say this: for the first 3, you need to see all 3 of them to enjoy the you can watch 1 to enjoy the experience, but all 3 makes it even better. 4 feels like a bonus, not mandatory to watch, but if you want more Toy Story, you can undoubtedly enjoy Toy Story 4, no problems. So
you know what? 4 is a farewell. That's what it is. It's like a farewell. It's like we've had 1, 2, and 3, and you thought 3 was the ending, but no, this is the true farewell. Like Woody's leaving. Like he's been our star character, and this is the end of his story. But I agree, because I think Toy Story overall is a movie about all the toys and their relationships and how they act together. Yeah. While Toy Story 4 made it seem more like, oh no, this is Woody's story.
I agree.
So I think that's... So then, if we're going to do it that way, 1 through 3...
10.
It's got to be a 9 out of 10, honestly.
For me, it's just 10 out of 10. Toy Story 4 is a 9 out of 10 because there are things I didn't like in it as much as I did the first 3, but still, I enjoy it because it's the most genuine Disney movie we got that year compared to all the other stuff that was made at the time. Like, it's more honest. It's more, welcome back to the good old days. Welcome back to a time when we weren't just this big-ass corporation that bought everything on sight.
Exactly.
Normally, I like to criticize nostalgia. When Toy Story 4 came
out, it was like, oh, wow. Like, we're back into the good old days of Disney.
Yeah, normally I like to criticize nostalgia because that's all people care about. But in the case of Toy Story, I think it's fine because at least it took us back to a time when Disney was less about trying to be a corporation and more so focus on just making a great series or a film. And I know there's good stuff they can do now.
About that, too, is that probably more adults went to see this film than kids when it was released.
Hell, Ernie and I got to see it last year, and I was happy to enjoy it with him because we both
I went with a bunch of my friends, too. It was crazy. It was so cool to relive it.
Yep, without a doubt.
All right.
So, yeah, I guess one thing we can do before we go is just like, what is one memory you have with the Toy Story stuff outside of the films, like toy-wise or side stuff-wise?
You know, I did have a Woody doll for a while. It was just like the one from the movie. I'd pull the thing on his back, and he'd say all the cool catchphrases. I don't know where he went, though.
I have some of the old Woody dolls, but they're like in my some sort of storage area downstairs.
Yeah, right.
I have like a new copy from JCPenney, but it's fine. But I want the collection version. Same for Buzz because the Spanish Buzz is not bad, but I would much prefer the quality collection one because the quality feels much nicer in hand, and I would love to get it. Maybe one day I will, but I also want to get that patriotic Buzz Lightyear at a flea market one day while listening to Thrift Shop from that one guy that made the song in 2012.
Jesus, Macklemore.
Yeah, Macklemore. You better play that music when I look for that Buzz Lightyear. But yeah.
I'm gonna buy someday.
I got a patriotic
$20 in my pocket.
I'm hunting for a Buzz Lightyear. that supports this
is-
country.
God.
But yeah,
Uh,
I love you, Toy Story.
yeah.
Then again, I love Batman Beyond, I love Transformers Prime, and I love X-Men 2000. So yeah, I'm very happy with this episode. I'm pretty sure some of the guests we had weren't available, unfortunately. But it was so good.
We lost
like,
2.
Yeah, but still glad that we get to talk about 4 things that make me happy. Now, will we get the same sort of pattern with the next episode? We'll see. So, I'm grateful for you to talk with me once again, Evie.
Yeah, always a pleasure, sir. Can't wait till next time.
We hope to see you guys at the audience at the next episode. But until then, take care.